for today's demo, what we're gonna do is one of my basic, most favorite recipes, and that would be the apple crisp. Okay, now if you have not watched my knife safety video, you need to make sure that you do that first before we do apple crisp, because I'm not really gonna go over knife safety with apple crisp. I'm gonna assume that of course you're being responsible and following my direction. With the apple crisp, what I am also going to teach you is if you do not have enough time to bake an apple crisp, you can actually also do it in the microwave. So I'll teach you guys a cheater. And you can also add things to apple crisp. So for today's demo, I'm actually going to add some fresh rhubarb that I got from the store today because it's in season and I love rhubarb. But you can add frozen berries. You can add, I wouldn't add bananas. You could do like pears, you could do strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, all of that stuff. But of course, you always want to make sure that you've got a good foundation, and in that, that's going to be the apple. Okay, so very first thing I'm going to do is I'll show you guys the recipe. After I've done that, I'm going to preheat my oven. So for this one, I want to make sure that my racks are down at the middle. Okay, I've got my oven. I'm going to preheat it to convection 375. If you don't have convection, 400 bake. I am then going to wash my hands thoroughly for 20 seconds. Grab my clean towel, and I'm ready to rock and roll. All right, so this should come together pretty simply. I am going to make sure that I've got all my equipment out and ready to go. Come on over. Now, for this lab or for this demo, what I'm going to be using is something that some of you guys might not have seen before. It's called a pastry blender, okay? Some of you guys have this at home, some of you guys don't, but you can still make recipes where it says to cut in butter or margarine or fat. All you're gonna do is you'll take a really sturdy fork and you can kind of use these prongs like you would a pastry blender, okay? So if you do not have a pastry blender, please make sure that you've got a sturdy fork that will not be bent easily, okay? Other than that, I've got my measuring cups, I've got my measuring spoons. I do not need a liquid measure for this one because we're mostly dealing with dry or solid ingredients, all right? I have started my slicing process already, and we will be using apple slices, and usually I say 2 apples for this. I'm gonna add in rhubarb. You can take a look at kind of your fruit level. You wanna make sure that it covers the bottom of your casserole dish. So this is my casserole dish I'm gonna be using. It is oven safe and microwave safe. Corral is awesome. If you do not have a traditional casserole dish, you can also use a pie plate if you wanted. You could use a loaf pan. I've definitely done crisp and loaf pans. It's kind of your option, all right? But I'm gonna be using my Corral pie plate or my Corral casserole dish because it's awesome for this stuff, okay? So the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to take my apples and I'm going to slice them because that's going to take the most amount of time. So I've already pre-cut one of my apples. Now I want to peel it. A lot of you guys can use an apple peeler and you can peel your apples. That's totally fine. When you're doing that, you're just going to want to make sure you hold your apple and you peel down. Don't peel it over top of a garbage can because if you let go of the apple, there goes the apple, all right? What I usually recommend is that you peel over top of a countertop. Put your extras or your peels into your compost, and then you're ready to roll, okay? So for paring, what I'm gonna do is take my paring knife, and of course, you guys know what a paring knife is because you've watched my knife safety demo. And I'm just gonna work my way around the apple and get it prepared for my slicing. Now, what I would recommend you do is you peel all of your apples all at once, and then you can slice them all at once, and then you're not going back and forth. I know that peeling can kind of be tedious, but just get it over and done with, and then there you go. You do want to make sure that you peel your apples because you want them to break down a little bit. The apples that I'm using for this recipe are Gala. I usually use Gala because they're cheap and easy to get. They usually make a pretty sweet-ish apple. The sweeter the apple, the less time it takes to bake, so consider that. When we actually recommend, or when you guys make, say, like apple pies, the best type of apple that people usually recommend is a Granny Smith, those really, really sour green apples. And that's because they keep their shape the best and they take the longest to break down. So those are the ones that we would use in that sense. If you are like a purist, go for the Granny Smith, that's fine. Otherwise, honestly, Gallo works great, Ambrosia. There's so many different kinds. Pink Lady is really sweet, so they actually break down much faster. But again, whatever apples you have, and if your apples are about to go bad, make a crisp out of them, okay? Tastes delicious. All right, so I've got my apples here, and I'm gonna take the next one, and I've already washed this. Please make sure that you guys wash your produce when it comes home from the grocery store. So I've washed this one, I've washed my rhubarb, it's ready to roll, okay? Especially now. So again, when I pare, I just wanna go underneath the surface where the peel is supposed to go. Don't wanna get too much of the meat of the actual apple. Get peels everywhere. If you are just comfortable with peeling, just peel the apple, okay? You can core an apple as well, but for me, honestly, I find it much faster just to cut off the apple from the core itself. So I've got this. I'm gonna take my paring knife or my chef's knife if I wanted to switch it up, but I'm just gonna keep my paring knife, and I'm gonna go as close to the core as I possibly can in order to get the most apple meat for this. And if I get part of the core, I'm not going to worry about it because I can chop that off easily. Okay, so instead of coring it, which is essentially what I get with this anyways, I can just slice it off. So I've got my chunks there. I'm just going to take off any peel that was left over. And with this one, I'm just gonna take this little bit of core out so that I'm good to go. All right, now apple slices, what I wanna make sure I'm doing is I'm slicing so that they're all uniform in size, and I don't want any huge chunks because I want this to be able to cook pretty fast. So when we do apple slices for say, you know, pies or crisps, we always wanna make sure they're long, they're thin, they're good, okay? So I'm going to put all my apples in this bowl. Actually, I might switch bowls now that I think about it. Yeah, I'm going to put it into my big bowl. So I'm making it claw, working my way through. My knife is doing my work. And 2 apples should give me more than enough for a pretty good sized casserole dish. Well, medium, I would say, medium to small. All right, so I've got all my apples in there. I'm now going to take my rhubarb, and rhubarb I love. I absolutely love rhubarb. It's that little bit of tartness. You do not have to add rhubarb if you do not like to. I really enjoy rhubarb, so I'm going to add it. And so for my rhubarb, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice it similar to my apples. And about the same thickness, just so they all cook about the same. And rhubarb is a little bit tart. And so if you are not a huge fan of tart, you can add a little bit more sugar into this filling. So essentially the apple mix is going to be like a filling to compensate. But for us and our family, we usually end up putting this with ice cream since we don't need it that sweet. So I've gone all the way to the end. I'm actually only going to use one stalk, which is totally fine. I'll save that one for something else. And I'm just going to use my spoon just to mix. And in this, I'm going to measure out some stuff. So I'm going to add in my sugar. So I'm going to do 15 milliliters of sugar in here. Heap. Because I have the rhubarb, I think I'm just going to add in 5 more. And then I'm going to add flour. Now, flour I'm going to add just to give it a bit of a base so that my apples don't completely mush out. I want them to remain in their shape. And because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to coat them in flour. And what that will do is ensure that the apple stays, okay, instead of making like applesauce. Right? So I'm just going to grab my gluten-free flour. And again, it's going to be 15 milliliters. And then 2 milliliters of cinnamon. Now, for those of you guys who have a cinnamon allergy, I'm terribly sorry. I love cinnamon. You do not need to put the cinnamon in. What I might do instead then is I would use probably brown sugar with these apples, just so it's more, it gives it more flavor than just white sugar. But again, you could just do the white sugar and the flour and you'd be fine. So 2 milliliters. And I'm gonna mix it so that everything is well coated. Now you can do this recipe with frozen fruit as well. Just factor in that it's going to be a little bit more soupy because you'll have the water as it defrosts from the fruit. All right, so before I put this into my casserole dish, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to grease down my casserole dish. Now I could spray my casserole dish with spray, or I could take some margarine, which is kind of what's in here. This is pre-measured. And I can just grease down my dish. And this is gonna make it so that I can kind of take out my apples really easily, and it makes cleanup a lot easier too. So I just have a little piece of parchment. If I was using pre-wrapped margarine, I could save the wrapping and then grease down. Or, I mean, if you don't mind, you can put your hands in, but I try to avoid that. Got my casserole dish all greased, and I'm good to go. So I'm just going to dump my stuff in. And my rhubarb's kind of bunched together, so I'm just laying it out. All right, so I've got all of my filling in there. It's got a good flat, okay? And then I'm gonna make my topping and I'm gonna spread it over top. Now, those of you guys who were in my rotation and have done apple crisp before, this is usually what I recommended, that you put it in the microwave and cook it. But because you guys are at home and you guys have time, you don't have to put it in the microwave. Oh, it's a blessing. Okay, so I am gonna make my filling though, or my topping, sorry. I already did my filling. So for my topping, I'm going to take my brown sugar, my rolled oats, and my butter. I'm going to do 30 milliliters of brown sugar, which is going to be 215s. And again, I'm going to pack it in because I want all the brown sugar. More flour again to give it structure. So I'm going to do 215s of the flour. Equal 30. And then my oats. So what I would recommend is that you use rolled oats, but you could use quick rolled oats as well. Just do not use steel cut because it will not taste good. It will not cook down fast enough. Okay, so I am going to do 50 milliliters of rolled oats. So for that one, I'm going to do 225s. I also have the option of using my 50 if I wanted to, but I'm just going to stick with my measuring spoon. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my butter. Okay, so I give this a good stir just to make sure there's no lumps of, oh, my oven's ready. Lumps of brown sugar. I'm going to take my butter, and it should be cold, okay? And I'm going to place it into my bowl. Now, I can use this fork, okay, to cut in my butter, all right? Or I could use my pastry blender, and I am going to use my pastry blender. So my goal with this is basically to cut in so that I create pea-like pieces. So I want to see my butter, okay? Now, some of you guys might have learned a cheater method where you melt all of your butter and you mix it all together. I find that this makes a crispier crisp. I think my butter was held out a little bit too long. This is margarine, by the way. You can use margarine for sure. But I want pea-like pieces, which is this is not really creaming. My margarine was too soft. It'll still create a beautiful crisp. I'm not too worried. Okay, so I'm actually going to move to my fork now. Conglomerate. In a perfect world, you'd have a really, really cold margarine. I think the day's too warm as well. All right, so I've got this, and then I'm going to spread it over top of my apples and my rhubarb. And what I want to do is create basically a barrier, a thin layer between my apples the oven, and I'm going to bake this. Of course, I'm going to wash my hands first because I got butter and margarine all over. I'm going to take my crisp. Now, if you have a casserole dish that has a lid on it, you could always do this, right, and then cook it without for like the last 5 minutes. But I'm just going to cook it like this so that my it all gets crisped up. I'm gonna put it in my oven, I think 30 to 35 minutes is what I told you guys, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go my timer. I'm always gonna set it for the lowest end, and then I'm gonna see how it goes. Now, how I see how it goes is this. I'm going to take a fork, or I can take my paring knife, and I'm going to put it into my casserole dish. If I put it in and there is resistance to that, so if there's pushback from the apples, they are not baked. If my knife or my fork goes all the way through easily, then my apples are good to go, okay? You can go off the topping, it will crisp up, it will get golden brown, but this is the best way to do it to make sure that you do not have raw apples, because that sucks in apple crisp, okay? So I'll see you on the second video, and we'll take out this crisp and see how we